The old man's hands trembled as he lifted the army Colt from its wooden case. Sunlight filtered through the porch beams of the Westfield ranch, casting long shadows across weathered floorboards that had known 64 years of footsteps. Jack Westfield, 98 years old, with hair white as Arizona snow, turned the revolver slowly in his gnarled fingers. His grandson Thomas sat forward in the rocking chair, 16 years old and hungry for stories, the way only the young can be. The boy had asked a simple question, a dangerous question. "Grandpa, did you really kill people?" Jack's pale blue eyes, still sharp despite nearly a century of seeing, fixed on the distant horizon, where heat shimmered over 300 acres of hard-won land. He was silent for so long that Thomas wondered if the old man had fallen asleep with his eyes open, the way he sometimes did after lunch. Then Jack spoke, his voice like gravel rolling downhill. "Sit down, boy. I'm going to tell you about the year 1871, the year I met your grandmother, Ayanna. But before that, I was a different man, a man who only knew how to kill and how to wait for death." He set the Colt on the small table between them with a heavy thunk. "This gun belonged to your grandmother. It saved my life 4 times. But before that, it killed 4 men. Let me tell you how." Thomas leaned forward, eyes wide. Jack's voice dropped lower, carrying them both backward through time. "Listen close, boy. A man isn't measured by how many enemies he's dropped. He's measured by how many people he's saved. I learned that too late. But thank God, not too late." The old man closed his eyes, and the years fell away like autumn leaves. February 1871, Arizona Territory. The dawn came cold and sharp, the kind of cold that makes a man's bones ache with memory. Jack Westfield, 34 years old then, and already carrying the weight of 1,000 ghosts, tracked a wolf through the rocky terrain of his ranch. 3 dead calves in 1 week, each worth $15, $45 total, a fortune when a working man made $80 a month if he was lucky. The wolf had to die. Jack carried his Winchester Model 1866, the brass-framed rifle they called Yellow Boy for its golden shine. 44 rimfire cartridges, 15 rounds in the tube magazine. The gun had cost him $50 2 years before, the price of survival on the frontier. He knelt by the tracks, 4-inch paw prints pressed deep into the frost-hardened mud. 80 pounds at least, probably more. A lone male, old, teeth worn down from years of crushing bone. Desperate, dangerous, the kind of predator that didn't stop until something stopped it. Jack knew the feeling. He'd been tracking for 2 hours when he heard the gunshots. 3 rapid cracks that split the morning silence like an axe through kindling. Not the methodical fire of a hunter, the desperate shots of prey. Every instinct from the war flooded back. Jack dropped into a crouch, Winchester coming up smooth as breathing. His heart hammered against his ribs. 4 years since Appomattox, but his body remembered. His body always remembered. He moved through the scrub brush without sound, lessons learned in blood still fresh. The dried creek bed bent around a cluster of boulders the size of covered wagons, and there, collapsed at the water's edge, a figure lay bleeding into the dust. A woman. Apache from the buckskin clothing torn and dark with blood. Her hair hung in matted tangles across her face. Her right hand still gripped a revolver, smoke wisping from the barrel like a departing spirit. Jack's eyes went to the gun first. Always assess the threat first. Army Colt, Model 1860. Standard Union Army issue, .44 caliber. Serial number stamped on the frame. Government property. No Apache should have such a weapon unless they'd taken it from a dead soldier. But this Colt was clean, well-maintained, not a battlefield prize. Something else. The woman's eyes snapped open, fierce and black as obsidian. She jerked the revolver toward him before Jack could speak. "Easy," he said, keeping his Winchester lowered but ready. "I'm not here to hurt you." Her eyes studied him with a predator's calculation, taking in the rifle, the worn Confederate cavalry boots he still wore, the burn scars visible above his collar, the wedding ring on his left hand, though the wife who'd given it had been dead 6 years. "They killed everyone." Her voice came rough, torn by thirst and grief and rage. "Help me live. I can repay you." Hoofbeats thundered in the distance, coming fast, coming hard. Jack made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He grabbed the woman under her arms and dragged her behind the boulders, just as 2 riders crested the ridge above the creek bed. "Tracks lead this way," one shouted, a lean man with a face like a hatchet blade. "The savage can't have gone far." Jack pressed the woman against the rock face, his body shielding hers. She trembled beneath him but made no sound. Her breath came hot against his neck. He could smell blood and gunpowder and the sage that grew wild in the high desert. "Holloway's brother is paying $1,000 for her head," the second rider called. "Dead or alive." The name hit Jack like a fist. Holloway. Captain James Holloway. He'd served with a man by that name during the war, a man who'd given orders that haunted Jack still. The riders circled twice, close enough that Jack could hear their horses breathing. Then the dust cloud of their departure rose against the empty sky. Jack waited 5 full minutes before he moved. Old habits. "What's your name?" he asked, examining her wounds. A bullet graze on her right thigh, 2 inches long. A deep knife wound in her left side, 4 inches, needing 8 to 10 stitches at least. Multiple bruises. Dehydration. Blood loss approaching a pint. "Ayanna," she whispered, wincing as he pressed his bandana against the bleeding wound on her side. "I'm taking you to my ranch," Jack said. "Can't leave you out here. But there'll be questions that need answering." Her fingers tightened around the army Colt, knuckles white. There always are. The ride back to the Westfield ranch took an hour. Ayanna slipped in and out of consciousness, slumped against Jack's chest. He could feel her heartbeat against his arm, fast and fluttering like a trapped bird. The ranch appeared over the rise. 300 acres purchased in 1866 with his Army discharge pay. $300 that represented everything he had left after the war took everything else. The land had been empty then, just like him, waiting to be filled with purpose. 50 head of longhorn cattle grazed in the distance, worth $9 each. $450 on the hoof. 7 horses in the stable, 3 working horses at $30 each, 4 saddle horses at $40. His timber cabin stood solid, built over a year and a half with his own hands and $200 in materials. It was a good life, a hard life, a lonely life. Diego Vasquez appeared on the porch before Jack dismounted. The Mexican ranch hand limped down the steps, his left leg stiff from the Confederate mini-ball that had shattered his thigh at Gettysburg. He'd been 29 then. Now 42, gray threading through his black hair, but his eyes still sharp. "Patron, who is she?" "Found her by the creek, wounded, being hunted." Jack dismounted carefully, lifting Ayanna down with the gentleness of a man who'd once held dying soldiers. "Need the medicine box." Diego's weathered face creased with concern, but he asked no more questions. That was why Jack had hired him 4 years ago. The man understood that some things needed doing before they needed explaining. They'd learned that together at Devil's Den, when Diego had carried Jack 2 miles under Confederate fire after a shell fragment opened Jack's back like a butchered hog. Inside the cabin, Jack laid Ayanna on the bed he hadn't shared in 6 years. The sheets still smelled faintly of lavender, though Emma was long gone. The firelight cast dancing shadows across the ceiling beams, much like the flames that had taken Emma and little Sarah while he'd been away at war. The scars on his back pulled tight as he bent to tend Ayanna's wounds, permanent reminders of the day he'd arrived home to find only ashes. 6 years of waking up alone, wondering why he'd survived when everyone he loved had died. Jack cleaned Ayanna's wounds with whiskey, 80 proof, the best antiseptic available. He'd learned field medicine in the war from a manual written in 1861 by a surgeon who'd trained at Harvard. Needle sterilized in flame, thread made from horsehair, stronger than cotton, 8 stitches spaced a 1/4 inch apart, each one placed with the precision of a man who'd sewn up dozens of soldiers and knew the difference between a wound that healed and one that killed. He bandaged her with clean linen strips soaked in diluted carbolic acid. For the pain, 20 drops of laudanum dissolved in water. Opium tincture. She'd sleep now. Ayanna's eyes fluttered open as Jack finished. She jerked upright, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Her hands found only empty air. "Easy," Jack said, his voice low and steady. "You're safe for now." She scanned the cabin with a warrior's eye, cataloging exits, weapons, threats. Her gaze settled on the silver-framed daguerreotype on the small table. A woman with gentle eyes and blonde hair. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, caught mid-laugh. "Your wife?" Ayanna asked. "Was." Jack turned away, busying himself with putting away the medical supplies. "How?" "Raiders, 1865. Burned the house while I was riding home from the war." Ayanna was silent for a long moment. When Jack turned back, he saw understanding in her dark eyes, the recognition of shared loss. "I'm sorry," she said simply. Before Jack could respond, the cabin door swung open. Diego stood in the doorway, his face grave as a tombstone. "Bad news, patron. I rode into Copper Springs for supplies. There's a bounty hunter named Nathaniel Holloway in town. He has 5 men with him. They're offering $1,000 for an Apache fugitive. A woman." Jack felt the weight of those words settle across his shoulders like a yoke. "What did you do?" he asked Ayanna, keeping his voice neutral. As a former Union soldier, he respected military authority, but he'd also seen commanders who abused their power, men who viewed Indians as less than human. Ayanna met his eyes without flinching. "I killed a man, Captain Marcus Holloway." The name confirmed what Jack had feared. "Why?" "He ordered his men to massacre my village." Her voice came flat, empty of emotion, the kind of emptiness that comes after grief has burned everything else away. 23 people, children, elders. I was hunting when I returned. She looked away, staring at something only she could see. I tracked him for 2 weeks. Then I put a bullet through his black heart. On the porch in 1935, old Jack paused in his telling. Thomas sat motionless, barely breathing. "Did you turn her in, Grandpa?" Jack smiled, a thin curve of his weathered mouth. "That's not how the story goes, boy. Because that night, while we slept, 3 more Apache warriors arrived at my ranch. And the next morning, an old friend came to betray me." He picked up the Army Colt again, turning it slowly in the fading sunlight. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand what happened next. How a sheriff I'd served with at Antietam, a man who'd saved my life, came to my door with murder in his eyes and greed in his heart. Thomas leaned forward. "Tell me, Grandpa." "I will, boy, I will. But first, fetch me some water. My throat's dry from all this talking. And this next part, well, it's the hardest to tell. Because it's about betrayal. And there's nothing that cuts deeper than betrayal by a friend." The sun sank lower over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of copper and blood. And in the gathering twilight, the old man prepared to continue his story. A story of violence and redemption, of hatred and love, of a frontier that demanded everything and gave back only what a man could take with his own two hands. The story of how Jackson Westfield learned that survival wasn't the same as living, and how an Apache woman with a gun and a heart full of justified rage taught him the difference. Thomas returned with a tin cup of water, his hands steady despite the weight of the story settling over him like a heavy blanket. Jack drank slowly, his Adam's apple bobbing in his weathered throat. He set the cup down and stared at the family cemetery visible beyond the stable, 3 headstones standing like silent witnesses under the spreading oak. "You see those graves, boy?" Thomas nodded. Diego Vasquez, Emma Westfield, Ayanna Westfield. 3 people who taught me what it means to be a man. Diego taught me loyalty. Emma taught me love. Ayanna taught me how to live again after I thought living was finished. The old man's voice cracked slightly. "But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me tell you what happened the morning after I brought Ayanna home. Let me tell you about Henry Blackwood." The story resumed, pulling them both backward through the decades. Sheriff Henry Blackwood arrived at the Westfield Ranch just after sunrise. Jack recognized the silhouette before the rider was close enough to see clearly. 45 years old, broad-shouldered, sitting a horse the way only cavalry-trained men do. They'd fought together in the 7th Cavalry. They'd bled together at Antietam. They'd fought together in the 7th Cavalry. They'd bled together at Antietam. The bloodiest single day of the war. When a Confederate bullet tore through Jack's shoulder, it was Henry Blackwood who'd carried him to safety. "You owe me a drink when this is over, Westfield," Henry had said, grinning through powder-blackened teeth. "I'll owe you more than that," Jack had replied, gritting against the pain. 9 years later, Henry Blackwood dismounted in front of Jack's cabin. But he wasn't grinning now. "Jack," he called, removing his hat to reveal graying hair. "We need to talk." Jack stepped onto the porch, keeping his Winchester visible but lowered. A warning without threat. Yet. "Henry, heard you might have company." Blackwood's eyes flicked toward the cabin. "News travels fast in Copper Springs. Faster when a bounty hunter named Nathaniel Holloway is buying drinks and asking questions." "That's so. Don't play dumb with me, Jack. We've known each other too long." Blackwood shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Holloway says the Apache woman killed his brother, Captain Marcus Holloway. Says she's wanted for murder and insurrection, federal charges." Jack said nothing, watching his old friend with the same careful attention he'd once used to spot Confederate pickets. "I know you, Jack." Blackwood's voice softened. "You've always had a soft spot for lost causes. But this one's trouble. Real trouble. Holloway has connections, government connections, papers from the territorial governor." Still, Jack remained silent. "I'm warning you as a friend." Blackwood stepped closer, dropping his voice. "Give her up, before you lose everything." He paused, the unspoken words hanging heavy between them. again. The reference to Emma and Sarah landed like a physical blow. Jack's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. I appreciate the concern, Henry, but I need to hear the whole story first. Blackwood shook his head slowly, genuinely pained. Don't wait too long, Jack. Nathaniel Holloway won't. The sheriff rode away, but something about the visit sat wrong in Jack's gut. Old instincts whispering warnings. He'd learned to trust those whispers during the war. They'd kept him alive when plenty of better men had died. Inside the cabin, Ayanna stood by the fireplace. She'd found the Colt Jack had set on the mantel. Her hand rested on it, not quite picking it up, but ready. You should have given me to him, she said quietly. Probably. Jack moved to the small table and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. But I've never been good at doing what I should. He handed her a glass. She took it, but didn't drink, studying him with those fierce, black eyes. Tell me about Captain Marcus Holloway, Jack said. Tell me everything. Not the version you'd tell a judge. The truth. Ayanna was silent for a long moment. Then she began. My father was a tribal scout. Before the Troubles, he worked with the cavalry. He believed we could live alongside the white man. He was wrong. She turned the glass slowly in her hands. A cavalry officer taught me to shoot when I was 16. Said I had natural talent. Said I could be a bridge between our peoples. Her voice turned bitter. He died in a skirmish 2 years later. I kept his Colt, kept practicing, got good enough that the young warriors respected me, good enough that when Marcus Holloway came, I wasn't in the village. What happened? 3 months ago, gold was discovered on our tribal lands. Small deposits, but enough. 2 days later, Captain Marcus Holloway arrived with 30 men, called for a meeting with our elders, said the army wanted peace, said we could work together. Ayanna's hand tightened on the glass until her knuckles went white. They were still talking when his men opened fire. Women, children, elders, all shot like dogs. My younger brother, Takoda, ran to warn me. He was 12 years old. They caught him, tortured him for sport before they killed him. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded paper, creased and stained with old blood. I found this in Holloway's tent after I killed him. His orders. Jack unfolded the paper carefully. Official military letterhead. Department of Arizona. Date, November 3rd, 1870. Signed by a general Jack had served under during the war, a man known for his hatred of Indians. The text was brief and damning. Captain Marcus Holloway was authorized to clear hostile Apache elements from strategic mineral deposits by any means necessary. Collateral damage acceptable. Acquisition of said lands priority for national interest. This doesn't justify murder, Jack said, though the words tasted like ash in his mouth. No, Ayanna agreed, but it explains it. Before Jack could respond, the dogs outside began barking, frantic, alarmed. Diego's voice cut through the noise. Patron! Riders! Jack grabbed his Winchester and moved to the window. Through the gap in the curtains, he saw Sheriff Blackwood riding back toward the ranch. But Henry wasn't alone this time. 3 Apache warriors rode with him. No, not with him. Following him, tracking him. Jack's hand tightened on the rifle. Had Henry betrayed them already? Led enemies straight to his door? But then Ayanna pushed past him to the window. She sucked in a sharp breath. Kuruk, she whispered. He's alive. The lead Apache warrior raised his hand in a gesture of peace. He called out in English, his voice carrying across the dusty yard. Ayanna Redwing, it is Kuruk. We come as friends. Ayanna was out the door before Jack could stop her, running across the yard with a speed that belied her injuries. The Apache warrior dismounted and caught her, but their embrace was brief, restrained. Apache custom. Public displays of emotion were weakness. Jack followed more slowly, Winchester still ready. Diego appeared from the barn, shotgun in hand, his face a mask of uncertainty. Kuruk was 31 years old, his face marked by 3 parallel scars that ran from temple to jaw. War scars. Earned scars. He studied Jack with the same careful assessment Jack gave him. "You are the one who saved Ayanna?" Kuruk asked. "Found her. Patched her up. That's all." "That is everything." Kuruk placed his hand over his heart. "I am Kuruk. This is Nahuel." He indicated a younger warrior, maybe 24, with angry eyes. "And Chuvio." The third man was older, late 30s, with gray streaking his long hair and the calm bearing of experience. "Jack Westfield. This is Diego Vasquez." "We mean no harm to your ranch," Kuruk said formally. "We tracked Ayanna for 3 days. When we heard of the bounty, we knew she would need help." "How many of you survived?" Ayanna asked, her voice tight. 15, hidden in the sacred caves. Chief Nietzsche lives, though he was shot 3 times. He is still healing." Ayanna's legs buckled. Jack caught her elbow, steadying her. She'd thought her uncle dead. This news, this impossible hope, was almost too much to bear. "Your people are welcome here," Jack said, making the decision instantly. "In war, you learn to judge men quickly. Trust your gut or die." His gut said these warriors were honorable. "We have a common enemy now." Diego shifted nervously. "Patron, are you certain?" "No," Jack admitted. "But I'm certain of what's right. These men came to help one of their own, same as you and I would do." Kuruk nodded slowly, respect dawning in his eyes. "The bounty hunter, this Holloway, he has many men?" "At least 5 when Diego saw him in town. Could be more by now." "Then we fight together." It wasn't a question. That night, they fortified the ranch. Diego dug shallow trenches between the cabin and stable, using techniques he'd learned at Gettysburg. Jack positioned spare rifles at strategic windows. Ayanna prepared bandages and medicines, her hands steady despite the pain from her wounds. The Apache warriors moved like ghosts, identifying sniper positions in the rocks 200 yards out and marking escape routes through the canyon. By midnight, they were as ready as they'd ever be. 3 Americans, 3 Apache, against a bounty hunter with money, men, and the law on his side. Bad odds. Jack had faced worse. Around 2 in the morning, Jack found Ayanna on watch by the dying fire. He brought 2 cups of coffee, strong and bitter the way soldiers drank it. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Can you?" "Haven't slept well since 1865. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of quiet that settles between people who understand grief without needing to explain it. "Tell me about the war," Ayanna said finally. "Which part? The glory or the horror?" "The part that made you who you are." So Jack told her about Antietam. September 17, 1862, the cornfield where men fell like harvested wheat. 23,000 casualties in 12 hours. He'd been 25, still believing the war would be glorious. By sunset, he knew better. About holding the hand of a 16-year-old boy as he died, crying for his mother with his guts in the mud. About the 37 men Jack killed, each face burned into memory. "I remember every one," he said quietly. "Do the faces haunt you?" "Every night." Ayanna shifted closer, not touching but near enough that he could feel her warmth in the cold desert darkness. "My people believe the souls of the dead return to the sacred mountain," she said. "That warriors carry the spirits of those they couldn't save, not as punishment, as purpose." Jack looked at her fully for the first time since they'd sat down. Really looked at her. Not as an Apache, not as a fugitive, but as a fellow survivor carrying the same weight he carried. "Your wife," Ayanna said softly. "You loved her very much." "I did. I do. But she's gone." "And you punish yourself by not living." Jack had no response to that. The truth hurt too much. The moment broke when Diego's whistle cut through the night. One long, two short, the signal for riders approaching. They were at battle stations in 30 seconds. Jack at the front window, Winchester ready. Ayanna upstairs with a second rifle, Diego on the stable roof. The Apache warriors in the trenches, invisible in the darkness. But the riders that emerged from the gloom weren't Nathaniel Holloway's men. A lone figure on horseback, moving slowly, deliberately. Hands visible and empty. Sheriff Henry Blackwood. "Jack," he called from 50 yards out. "I need to talk. I'm alone." Jack kept the Winchester aimed at Henry's chest, but didn't fire. Not yet. "Say what you came to say." "Not like this. Face to face, Jack. For old time's sake." Against his better judgment, Jack stepped onto the porch. He kept the rifle visible, finger on the trigger. Henry dismounted and walked forward slowly, hands at his sides. In the moonlight, his face looked older than his 45 years. Tired. Haunted. "I know you're hiding her, Jack. I know about the Apache warriors. I know about the evidence she has." "You came alone to tell me that?" "I came to warn you." Henry stopped 10 feet away. "Nathaniel Holloway convinced the territorial governor that Ayanna isn't just a murderer. He's saying she's a spy for renegade bands planning an uprising. It's a lie, but it doesn't matter. They're coming at dawn with federal authority. At least 12 men, maybe more." "And you?" Henry was silent for a long moment. "Nathaniel offered me $5,000, Jack. 5,000. To bring him the woman and any evidence she has. That's 5 years of a sheriff's salary." Jack's finger tightened on the trigger. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know. Because you saved my life at Antietam." Henry's voice cracked. "Because I have 3 children, Jack. 3 kids who need food and clothes and a future. And $5,000 would give them that." "So you're choosing them over me?" "I'm choosing them over everything." Henry met Jack's eyes, and in them Jack saw genuine anguish. "My wife died 2 years ago in childbirth. I'm all they have. If I die, they starve. If I stay poor, they suffer. I don't have the luxury of honor anymore, Jack. I lost that when Sarah died." Jack lowered the rifle slightly. "We fought together, Henry. Bled together. I know. And I'm sorry. God knows I'm sorry." Henry turned to leave, then paused. "I'll give you till dawn. Get her out. Run. It's your only chance." He mounted his horse and rode away into the darkness. From behind Jack, Ayanna's voice came cold and hard. "Why didn't you shoot him? He betrayed you. He was my brother in the war, saved my life. And now he tries to take it. Your white man's honor makes no sense." Jack turned to face her. "Maybe not. But it's all that separates us from men like Nathaniel Holloway." Diego climbed down from the stable roof, his face grim. "Patron, we have maybe 6 hours before they come. What do we do?" Jack looked at each of them in turn. Diego, loyal unto death. Ayana, fierce as fire. Kuruk and his warriors, honor-bound to protect their own. "We fight," Jack said simply. "We make them pay for every inch. And maybe, if we're lucky and mean enough, we send them running." "And if we lose?" Nahuel asked, the young warrior eager for battle. "Then we lose defending something worth defending. There are worse ways to die." They spent the remaining hours of darkness preparing, moving ammunition to multiple positions, filling water barrels in case of fire, planning fields of fire and fallback positions. Kuruk suggested ambush points in Apache, which Ayana translated. Diego contributed knowledge from Gettysburg about defending against superior numbers. It was almost like the war again, the waiting, the preparation, the certain knowledge that come sunrise, men would die. As the eastern sky began to gray, Jack found himself standing next to Ayana on the second floor, both checking their weapons in the growing light. "If I die today," she began, "you won't. But if I do, I want you to know something." She hesitated, searching for words. "I know," Jack said quietly. They stood close, the sunrise painting the sky in shades of red and orange, like blood and fire, like everything they'd both lost, and everything they might lose today. "When this is over," Ayana said, "will you teach me to read? Your books. I want to understand your people's stories." Jack felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of hope. "I'd like that." They were inches apart, faces close enough to feel each other's breath. The moment hung between them, fragile as morning frost. Then Diego's shout shattered it. "They're here!" Jack grabbed his Winchester and moved to the window. On the ridge overlooking the ranch, silhouetted against the rising sun, 12 riders sat their horses in a line. Nathaniel Holloway in the center, broad-shouldered and implacable. Sheriff Henry Blackwood to his right, his face a mask of conflicted duty. 10 hired guns spreading out on either side. Nathaniel's voice carried across the distance, amplified by a brass speaking horn. "Westfield, send out the Apache woman and surrender Marcus's orders. You have 5 minutes. Then we burn you out." Jack stepped onto the porch, Winchester held loose at his side. The morning sun warmed his face. It was a beautiful sunrise. Might be the last one he'd ever see. "Only thing you're getting, Holloway, is a funeral. I have 12 men. You have what? 3? 4? Diego popped up from behind the stable roof, shotgun visible. "You count wrong, gringo." Kuruk rose from a trench, rifle ready. "You count very wrong, white man." Nathaniel jerked in his saddle, surprised by the Apache presence. Jack could see him reassessing, calculating new odds. "You're harboring fugitives, Westfield. That's a federal crime." "So is massacring innocents." Jack's voice rang out hard as iron. "You ready to answer for your brother's crimes?" Nathaniel's hand went to his gun. Henry Blackwood put a restraining hand on his arm, saying something Jack couldn't hear. Nathaniel shook him off angrily. "My brother followed orders." "Orders to slaughter children? What kind of soldier follows that?" For just a moment, Nathaniel faltered. Doubt flickered across his face. Then it hardened again into righteous certainty. 5 minutes, Westfield. Then we're coming in." Jack raised his Winchester. "Come ahead, then. Let's get this done." The 5 minutes passed in terrible silence. Jack counted his heartbeats. 400 of them, before Nathaniel raised his hand and brought it down in a chopping motion. 12 rifles opened fire simultaneously. The Battle of Westfield Ranch had begun. The first volley shredded the morning silence. 12 rifles speaking at once, a thunderous chorus of death that splintered wood and shattered glass and filled the air with the copper smell of gunpowder. Jack dove behind the water barrel as bullets punched through the porch railing, sending splinters spinning like wooden shrapnel. The barrel shuddered with impacts. 1, 2, 3 holes punched clean through, water beginning to leak in thin streams. Jack rolled to his left, coming up with the Winchester already at his shoulder. Training from the war took over. His mind went cold and clear as winter ice. Find target. Breathe out. Squeeze trigger. The Winchester kicked against his shoulder. 120 yards downrange, one of Nathaniel's men jerked backward off his horse, a red flower blooming on his chest. He hit the ground and didn't move. 1 down, 11 to go. From the second-floor window, Ayanna's rifle cracked in steady rhythm. She worked the lever action with practiced speed, each shot deliberate and aimed. Jack saw a hired gun grab his leg and pitch sideways from his saddle. Saw another's horse rear and throw its rider as Ayanna's bullet grazed its flank. Diego's hunting rifle boomed from the stable roof, slow but deadly accurate. 200 yards out, an ex-Confederate mercenary took a bullet through the shoulder and collapsed. The Apache warriors fought differently. They fired from the trenches, popping up to shoot and dropping down before return fire could find them. Guerrilla tactics perfected over generations. Confusing. Deadly. 2 more of Nathaniel's men went down in the first 3 minutes. But Nathaniel had numbers and determination. His men spread out, finding cover behind rocks and scrub. They laid down suppressing fire, forcing Jack's people to keep their heads down. The battle settled into a brutal exchange, each side probing for weakness. 10 minutes in, Jack had fired 23 rounds. His shoulder ached from the Winchester's recoil. His ears rang with the constant crack of gunfire. Smoke hung in the air like fog, burning his throat and eyes. He dropped 2 men for certain, maybe wounded a third, but Nathaniel's force was adapting. Jack saw 2 riders detach from the main group, circling wide toward the stable. They carried torches, pine pitch wrapped in cloth, flames dancing in the morning air. "The stable!" Diego shouted from his perch on the roof. "They're going to burn us out!" Jack shifted position, trying to draw a bead on the riders, but they were moving fast, zigzagging, making themselves difficult targets. One threw his torch. It arced through the air like a falling star and landed on the stable roof 10 feet from where Diego crouched. Dry hay and old wood. The roof caught with terrifying speed. Flames spread across the shingles, reaching hungry fingers toward the sky. Inside the stable, the horses began to scream. 7 horses, $270 worth of livestock. More than that. Jack's livelihood, his ability to work the ranch, his survival. Diego looked down at the spreading fire, then at Jack. Even from 40 yards away, Jack could see the decision forming on his friend's weathered face. "Diego, no!" Jack shouted. "Stay in position!" But Diego was already moving. He threw down his rifle and scrambled down the roof toward the stable doors. His leg, never fully healed from Gettysburg, made him awkward, slow. "Diego, wait!" The Mexican ranch hand didn't stop, couldn't stop. Loyalty ran deeper than fear, deeper than sense. He reached the stable door and threw it open. Smoke billowed out in a black cloud. Horses stampeded past him, wild-eyed with terror. 7 horses bolting for freedom. Diego stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the flames. He turned back toward Jack, starting to smile. Mission accomplished. The horses were safe. The rifle shot came from 250 yards out, a perfect shot from a professional marksman. The bullet hit Diego in the left side of his chest, punching through his lung and into his heart. Diego's smile froze. His hand went to the wound, came away red. He took one step forward, then another. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed in the stable doorway. "Diego!" Jack's voice ripped from his throat, raw and terrible. He sprinted from cover, Winchester forgotten, thinking only of reaching his friend. Bullets kicked up dirt around his boots. One tugged at his sleeve. Another burned a line across his ribs. He didn't care, didn't feel them. He reached Diego and dragged him behind the water trough. The Mexican's shirt was soaked with blood. Too much blood. His breathing came in wet, bubbling gasps. "Should have," Diego coughed, red foam on his lips. "Stayed in Mexico. Too much excitement here." He tried to laugh. The laugh became a cough that brought more blood. Jack pressed his bandana against the wound, but the blood kept coming, pulsing between his fingers with each fading heartbeat. "Don't talk. Save your strength." "For what, Patron?" Diego's hand found Jack's arm, gripped it with surprising strength. "I am already dead. We both know this." "Diego, you are a good man, best I know." Diego's voice was fading, each word an effort. "Protect the girl. She is your future. Emma would approve. Don't you dare leave me, old friend." Diego smiled, blood staining his teeth. "Like Gettysburg again. We fight together one last time." His eyes lost focus, seeing something beyond Jack's shoulder, something far away. "Sarah is calling me. She says it's time." His grip on Jack's arm loosened. His chest stopped moving. Diego Vasquez was dead. Jack knelt there, his friend's blood soaking into the knees of his pants, and something inside him broke. All the control, all the cold calculation, all the careful restraint he'd maintained since Emma and Sarah died. It shattered like glass. He stood, Winchester in hand, and walked into the open. Bullets whined past him. One clipped his hat. Another drew blood from his left arm. He didn't notice, didn't care. He worked the Winchester's lever action, firing as fast as he could chamber rounds, not aiming carefully, not thinking, just shooting, pouring out rage and grief in lead and powder. A hired gun rose from behind a rock. Jack's bullet caught him in the throat. He went down gurgling. Another tried to run. Jack shot him in the back. No honor in it. No mercy. Just death. "Jack, get down!" Ayana's voice cut through the red haze of his fury. Jack blinked, suddenly aware of his exposed position. He dove behind a fence post as a bullet splintered the wood inches from his head. He was breathing hard, his hands shaking with adrenaline and grief. Diego's blood was still wet on his hands. Then he heard it, a sound that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, a sound that had terrified settlers for 200 years, the Apache war cry. Jack looked toward the ridge behind his ranch. 20 warriors on horseback sat silhouetted against the sky. At their head, a man Jack had thought dead, Chief Naichi, Ayana's uncle, 50 years old, with gray in his long hair and bandages visible beneath his deerskin shirt. Shot 3 times during the massacre, left for dead, but alive, very much alive. The chief raised his lance, and the war cry erupted from 20 throats at once, high-pitched, ululating, the sound of fury given voice. Then they charged. Not a cavalry charge in neat lines. Apache warfare was fluid, chaotic, terrifying. The warriors spread out as they descended the ridge, attacking from multiple angles at once. Some fired rifles, others loosed arrows in silence. Still others wielded war clubs and lances, ancient weapons as deadly as any modern gun. Nathaniel's men, caught between Jack's fortified position and the Apache charge, broke. 3 died in the first 30 seconds, war clubs crushing skulls, lances punching through bodies. One of the ex-Confederate mercenaries tried to run and took an arrow through the back. He sprawled face first in the dirt and didn't rise. Jack watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. This was justice. Not clean, not pretty, but justice nonetheless. Nathaniel Holloway, to his credit, didn't run. He rallied his remaining men, maybe 6 fighters still on their feet. They formed a tight knot, backs together, firing in all directions. But it wasn't enough. The Apache warriors hit them like a wave breaking on rocks. 2 more mercenaries went down. A third surrendered, throwing down his weapon and raising his hands. The Apache let him live, binding his wrists with rawhide. Through the chaos and smoke and screaming horses, Jack saw Nathaniel break away from the main fight. The bounty hunter was running toward the burning stable, toward where Jack had last seen Ayanna moving. Jack's blood turned to ice. He grabbed his Winchester and ran. His legs pumped, boots pounding the dirt. Smoke from the stable fire made his eyes water. The heat was intense, waves of it washing over him as he approached. Inside the stable, visibility was nearly zero. Smoke hung thick as wool, choking and burning. Flames crawled across the ceiling beams. The structure groaned, ready to collapse. "Ayanna!" Jack moved deeper into the inferno. His eyes stung, his lungs burned. He pulled his bandana over his mouth and nose, but it barely helped. Then he saw them. Nathaniel had Ayanna from behind, one arm locked around her throat, a knife pressed to her neck. The blade had already drawn a thin line of blood. Ayanna's Winchester lay on the ground 10 feet away, knocked from her hands. "It's over, Nathaniel." Jack raised his rifle, but he didn't have a clean shot. Ayanna blocked his line of fire. "Over?" Nathaniel laughed, a sound stripped of sanity. "It's not over till she's dead. Till they're all dead for what they did to Marcus. Your brother massacred children. He followed orders. He was a soldier. He wore scalps of those children on his belt." Ayanna spat the words. "I saw them." "Your brother was a monster." Nathaniel's knife hand trembled. The blade pressed harder against Ayanna's throat. More blood welled up, trickling down her neck. "Shut up! Shut up!" A burning beam crashed down behind them. Sparks exploded upward. The heat became unbearable. They had maybe a minute before the entire structure collapsed. Jack took a slow step forward, Winchester steady. "Nathaniel, I knew Marcus. We served together at Antietam." "Then you know he was a good man." "No. I know he followed orders, even evil ones." Jack took another step. "At Antietam, Marcus ordered us to burn a farmhouse. 3 children were still inside. I heard them screaming." Nathaniel's eyes widened. "You're lying." "I disobeyed. Pulled those kids out while Marcus threatened to have me court-martialed. He said orders were orders, even when those orders were murder." "No, Marcus wouldn't." "Your brother wasn't born evil, Nathaniel, but he let duty erase his humanity. That's what the war does. Turns good men into killers who follow orders without question." Nathaniel's grip loosened slightly. The knife pulled back from Ayanna's throat by a fraction of an inch. Doubt warred with grief on his face. "He was all I had," Nathaniel whispered. "After our parents died, Marcus raised me, fed me, protected me. He was my whole world." "I understand," Jack said, and meant it. "But understanding doesn't change what he did, doesn't change what you're doing now." For a moment, Jack thought Nathaniel might surrender. The knife wavered. His arm around Ayana's throat loosened. Then Ayana made her move. She dropped her full weight suddenly, becoming dead weight in Nathaniel's grip. He staggered, surprised. She slipped down and out of his grasp. Nathaniel stood exposed. Jack fired. The bullet hit Nathaniel's right shoulder, not his heart. Deliberately. Jack had aimed to wound, not kill. To give mercy, even now. Nathaniel howled and spun away, dropping the knife. Blood bloomed through his shirt. He crashed against a burning stall and fell to his knees. Ayana rolled clear and came up with her boot knife drawn. She could have killed Nathaniel then. One thrust to the throat or heart. Justice for her brother, for her village, for 23 dead. But she hesitated, the blade raised, looking at Jack. "Don't," Jack said quietly. "Let the law decide." Ayana's hand shook. Warrior instinct warred with something else, something Jack's words had planted. The law of white men who ordered the massacre? The law I'm going to enforce, starting today. She lowered the knife slowly. Nathaniel, on his knees and bleeding, laughed bitterly. "Just kill me. I don't want your mercy." "You don't get to choose," Ayana said. But Nathaniel's hand was moving, reaching for his boot, where he kept a derringer. A tiny .41 caliber pistol, single shot, hidden for exactly this moment. He drew it with his left hand, arm swinging up toward Ayana. "If I can't avenge Marcus, I'll die trying." 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Jack's Winchester, Ayana's Colt, recovered from where it had fallen. Both bullets hit Nathaniel in the chest, inches apart. The impact threw him backward against the burning wood. He slid down, leaving a smear of blood on the blackened timber. His last words were barely audible over the roar of the flames. "Marcus, forgive me." Then he was gone. Jack grabbed Ayana's arm. "We need to move, now." They ran. Behind them, the stable roof collapsed with a thunderous crash, sending a column of sparks and smoke into the morning sky. They burst out into daylight, coughing and gasping. The battle was over. Apache warriors stood among the bodies of Nathaniel's hired guns. 7 dead, 4 wounded and disarmed. Sheriff Henry Blackwood sat on the ground with his hands bound, his face a mask of shame and regret. Chief Naichi rode forward on a paint horse. Up close, Jack could see the bandages wrapped around the chief's chest and leg. 3 gunshot wounds that should have killed him, but hadn't. The man's vitality was remarkable. "You are the one who saved my niece?" Naichi asked in careful English. "Yes, sir." "Then you are brother to my people. Your enemy's blood waters this ground. The debt is paid." Jack looked at the carnage around them. 8 bodies. Diego's corpse still lay where he'd died. The stable burned to ashes. Bullet holes in every surface. Blood soaking into the thirsty earth. "No debt," Jack said quietly. "We fight for what's right. That's all." Naichi studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are wiser than most white men." Ayana approached her uncle. They embraced, Apache restraint giving way briefly to relief and joy. She was crying. Jack had never seen her cry before. He walked to where Diego lay. The fire had spread close enough that the Mexican's body was in danger of being consumed. Jack lifted his friend carefully, gently, and carried him toward the small family cemetery, where Emma and Sarah rested under wooden crosses. He laid Diego down in the shade of the oak tree he'd planted 6 years ago. The tree was young still, barely taller than a man, but it would grow. It would spread its branches over all of them, eventually. "Rest, old friend," Jack whispered. "Like Gettysburg, together one last time. He didn't realize Ayanna had followed until she knelt beside him. She placed a handful of wildflowers on Diego's chest. Apache custom for a fallen warrior. "He died protecting what you love," she said. "No man can ask for a better death." "I'd rather he lived." "Yes, but we don't always get what we want. Only what we're willing to fight for." Jack looked at her, this fierce woman with blood on her hands and grief in her eyes. This woman who'd lost everything and still found the strength to keep fighting, to keep living. "What do we do now?" he asked. Before she could answer, hoofbeats announced new arrivals. Jack's hand went to his Colt, but Ayanna touched his arm. "Wait." 3 riders appeared over the ridge, federal marshals by their badges. Behind them, a man in a black suit who could only be a territorial judge. They'd been summoned by someone, probably Henry Blackwood, hedging his bets. The lead marshal surveyed the battlefield with professional detachment. Bodies, wounded men, the smoking ruins of the stable. The battle was written clearly in blood and ashes. "I'm Marshal Henry Adams. This is Judge William Harrison. We received word of a federal fugitive and came to investigate." He looked at Jack. "I assume you're Jackson Westfield?" "I am." "And the Apache woman?" "Ayanna Redwing. She's under my protection." The marshal's eyebrows rose slightly. "Your protection? Sir, she's wanted for the murder of a United States Army officer, Captain Marcus Holloway, who was following orders to massacre her village." Jack pulled the blood-stained paper from his pocket. Orders signed by a general. Orders to clear Apache lands for mining interests by any means necessary. 23 civilians dead, including children. He held out the document. Judge Harrison took it, read it carefully, his face growing darker with each line. This is a war crime." "Yes, sir. And Ayanna Redwing killed the man who committed it. I call that justice, not murder." The judge looked at the bodies again, at the Apache warriors standing proud and armed, at Sheriff Blackwood sitting bound and ashamed, at Jack standing between Ayanna and the law. "This situation is more complicated than we were led to believe," the judge said slowly. "Marshal Adams, gather statements from everyone involved. I want a full accounting. And someone fetch a stenographer. We'll need official transcripts." Over the next 3 days, the truth emerged, piece by piece. Blackwood confessed everything, hoping for leniency. He revealed the conspiracy that went far beyond one captain's orders. A senator, multiple territorial officials, a web of corruption using Apache land theft to enrich themselves. The judge listened to it all with a face like stone. On the 3rd day, he rendered his judgment. "Henry Blackwood, you're guilty of conspiracy, extortion, and breach of duty. 5 years prison, badge and pension forfeited. However, your cooperation will be noted." Blackwood accepted the sentence without complaint. Then the judge turned to Jack. "Mr. Westfield, the territorial governor has authorized me to offer you a position, Sheriff of Copper County. We need men of integrity, men willing to enforce the law equally, regardless of race. Your actions here demonstrate that character." Jack looked at the burned remains of his stable, at Diego's fresh grave, at Ayanna standing nearby, her hand resting on the army Colt. "I'll accept," he said, "on one condition. Justice in this county applies to everyone, white, Mexican, Indian, Chinese, everyone. That's precisely why you're being offered the position." 2 weeks later, Jackson Westfield stood on the courthouse steps in Copper Springs and took his oath as sheriff. 100 people attended, half the town. The other half stayed away in racist protest. Jack didn't care about them. He pinned on the silver star and looked out at the mixed crowd. White faces, Apache faces, Mexican faces, the future looking back at him. "I've fought for this country," he said simply. "Bled for it. Lost family to it. Now I'll serve it differently. Not with bullets, but with law. Not with hate, but with fairness. Some won't like it. They can leave. The rest of us will build something better." Applause rose. Not universal, but genuine. Ayanna stood in the crowd, watching him. Their eyes met across the distance. She smiled, small and private. That evening, as the sun set over the newly rebuilt stable, Jack sat on his porch with the army Colt in his hands. Diego's grave was visible under the oak tree. The tree had grown 6 inches in the 2 weeks since the battle, fed by blood and tears and the bones of a loyal friend. Ayanna joined him on the porch, moving quietly. "What happens now?" she asked. "We rebuild. We heal. We try to make this county a place where everyone belongs. Will it work? I don't know, but we'll try. That's all anyone can do." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "When I return to my people, I'll tell them about you. About the white man who chose justice over gold, honor over greed. Don't make me a saint. I killed men today." "Yes, but only after they tried to kill you. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one. The desert night wrapped around them, cool and clean after the smoke and blood of battle. Tomorrow there would be work to do, a county to rebuild, trust to earn, a future to forge from the ashes of the past. But tonight, there was only this, the quiet, the stars. 2 survivors sitting side by side, carrying their dead, looking toward a horizon that promised nothing but possibility. And for the first time in 6 years, Jack Westfield felt something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. That hope, small as a candle flame in darkness, would grow. Would carry him through 9 years as sheriff, through marriage and children, through hate and love, through building a bridge that would stand for generations. But on this August day in 1935, the old man paused his story. Let that moment of hope settle in his grandson's heart before continuing. On the porch in 1935, old Jack set down the army Colt with a heavy thunk. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the weathered boards. Thomas sat motionless, his young face tight with the weight of the story. "Grandpa," the boy said quietly, "you killed all those men." "Yes." "Does it still bother you?" Jack was silent for a long moment, his pale eyes distant. "Every single day, boy. Every single day for 64 years. That's the cost of violence. Even when it's justified, even when it's necessary, it takes a piece of your soul. You do it because you must. Then you live with it because you have to." He stood slowly, old bones creaking, and walked to the porch railing. Beyond the stable, the family cemetery waited under the spreading oak. 3 headstones, 3 lives that had shaped his own. "Come with me, Thomas. There's something you need to see." They walked together across the yard, the old man's steps careful but steady, the boy matching his pace. The oak tree had grown massive in 64 years. Its branches spread wide enough to shade all 3 graves and still reach toward the sky. Jack stopped at Diego's headstone. Loyal friend, brave heart. The inscription he'd carved himself in 1871. Diego Vasquez taught me what loyalty means. Not the kind of loyalty that's bought with money or demanded by rank. The kind that's earned through shared blood and proven through sacrifice. He died saving horses because he knew I'd need them to survive. That's loyalty. He moved to the second grave. Emma Westfield, beloved first wife, lost too soon. Emma taught me how to love, how to build a home, how to see past survival to actually living. When she died, I thought that lesson died with her. I was wrong. Finally, he stood before the third headstone. Ayanna Westfield. Warrior, mother, love of my autumn years. Died January 19, 29, aged 84. Your grandmother taught me how to live again. She showed me that the heart isn't a cup that can only hold one love. It's a flame. The more you love, the brighter it burns, the more people it warms. Jack knelt with difficulty, his knees protesting. He placed his weathered hand on Ayanna's grave. I miss you, fierce one. Every sunrise without you feels incomplete. Thomas stood beside his grandfather, tears streaming down his young face. Tell me the rest, Grandpa. Tell me how you and Grandma built a life together. Jack smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. Then help me back to the porch, boy. This old body isn't what it used to be, and the story gets better from here. Harder in some ways, but better. They returned to the porch. Jack settled into his rocking chair with a grunt. Thomas poured fresh water from the pitcher, handed his grandfather the cup, then sat forward eagerly. After I became sheriff, Jack began, everything changed. Not overnight. Change never happens that way, no matter what the storybooks say. But slowly, week by week, we built something new. The story resumed, carrying them back to 1871. Jack's first month as sheriff was hell. Half the town refused to acknowledge his authority. Store owners turned their backs when he entered. Ranchers ignored his requests for information. The previous sheriff's deputies, all friends of Blackwood, resigned rather than serve under Jack. He needed deputies, men he could trust, men who understood what he was trying to build. His first choice was obvious. Sam Chen was 28 years old, Chinese immigrant, educated at a mission school in San Francisco. He'd worked as a clerk in the Copper Springs land office for 3 years, keeping his head down, enduring the casual racism that was as common as dust. But Sam had a gift for details, for remembering numbers and dates and discrepancies. It was Sam who'd noticed the altered survey maps. Sam who'd risked his job to bring the evidence to the territorial judge. Sam who'd helped expose the conspiracy that reached all the way to the territorial capital. Jack found him in the land office, hunched over ledgers, his careful script recording deed transfers. Mr. Chen. Sam looked up, surprise flickering across his face. In 3 years, no white man in town had called him Mr. Sheriff Westfield. I need a deputy, someone smart, someone honest, someone who isn't afraid to stand up to powerful men. Jack paused. Someone like you. Sam's pen stopped moving. He stared at Jack as if he'd spoken in tongues. Sir, I'm Chinese. No one will respect a Chinese deputy. Then they'll learn to, or they'll leave. Either way, I don't care. Jack pulled out a silver deputy's badge. $60 a month. Dangerous work. Half the town will hate you. Interested? Sam Chen looked at the badge for a long moment. Then he smiled, the first genuine smile Jack had seen on his face. When do I start? Right now. We have a case. Someone's been stealing cattle from the Apache reservation. Indian agent says it's Apache rustlers. I think it's white ranchers framing them. We're going to prove it." It took them 2 weeks of careful investigation, following tracks, questioning witnesses who were terrified to talk, finding the hidden canyon where stolen cattle were being rebranded. Sam's attention to detail proved invaluable. He noticed that the altered brands used a specific technique, one taught by a blacksmith in town. When they arrested Jonathan Wright, one of Copper Springs' wealthiest ranchers, for cattle theft and conspiracy, the town exploded. Wright's friends tried to organize a lynch mob, not for Wright, but for Jack and Sam. The audacity of arresting a respected white businessman on the word of Indians and a Chinese deputy was too much. Jack stood on the jailhouse steps with his Winchester, Sam at his side with a shotgun. Behind them, Kuruk and 5 Apache warriors had taken positions on the roof. Uninvited, but welcome. "Anyone who wants Wright can come get him," Jack announced to the crowd of 40 angry men. "But you'll have to go through us first, and I guarantee some of you won't make it." The crowd surged forward. Jack fired his Winchester into the air. "Next shot won't be a warning." The crowd hesitated. Behind Jack, Sam Chen's voice rang out, steady and clear. "The evidence is documented. Wright stole 118 head of cattle over 6 months. The law is clear. He goes to trial." "Since when does a Chinaman tell white men what the law is?" someone shouted. "Since this Chinaman wears a badge," Jack said coldly. "Sam Chen is my deputy. He speaks with my authority. Anyone who doesn't like it can file a complaint with the territorial governor. Or try to take this jail. Your choice." The standoff lasted 20 minutes. Finally, the crowd dispersed, muttering threats and promises. But they dispersed. Wright went to trial, was convicted, served 3 years in territorial prison. It was the first time in Arizona Territory history that a white rancher was imprisoned for crimes against Indians. Things got worse before they got better. Someone burned a cross in Jack's yard. He extinguished it and used the charred wood to build a fence post. Someone shot at Sam Chen from ambush. Missed. Jack tracked the shooter, arrested him, and made sure everyone in town saw the man in chains. Through it all, Ayanna watched from the Apache reservation. She'd returned to her people after the battle, as Jack knew she must. Chief Naichi was recovering, but needed help. The tribe needed to rebuild. Ayanna had responsibilities, but every week Jack rode to the reservation. Officially, as sheriff, checking on the peace. Unofficially, to see her. They talked, long conversations that stretched into evenings. He told her about the cases he was working, the resistance he faced, the small victories and large setbacks. She told him about her people, the children learning to read, the warriors learning to farm, the slow, painful process of adapting to a world that had tried to destroy them. They didn't talk about what was growing between them. Not yet. Some things needed time. 6 months after Jack became sheriff, Ayanna rode into town. She found him in his office, reviewing case files with Sam. "I need to report a crime," she said formally. Jack looked up, surprised by her tone. "What crime?" "Theft. Someone stole my heart 6 months ago. I'd like to file charges." Sam Chen suddenly discovered urgent business elsewhere in the building. Jack stood slowly, his heart hammering. "That's a serious accusation." "Yes, the thief is tall, has scars on his back, wears a badge." Ayanna's eyes sparkled with rare humor. "I believe you know him." "I might." Jack moved around the desk. "What's the penalty for this crime?" "In my culture, the thief must replace what he stole with something of equal value." They stood close now, alone in the office, the door open to the street, but no one watching. "I'm not sure I have anything of equal value," Jack said quietly. "You have a heart that's been broken and healed. That's worth more than gold." "Ayanna, I'm 34 years old. You're 26. I'm a white sheriff in a territory that barely tolerates Indians. You're an Apache woman who killed an army officer. This won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. There will be people who hate us for this. Let them hate. I've survived worse than hatred." Jack reached for her hand. She let him take it. Her fingers were calloused from work, strong and sure. "Then I should probably do this properly." He knelt, right there in the sheriff's office, on one knee on the dusty floor. "Ayanna Redwing, will you marry me? Will you help me build a world where our children can live without choosing sides, where they can be both Apache and American, both your people and mine?" Ayanna looked down at him, this man who'd risked everything for justice, who'd chosen honor over ease, who'd proven that love could bridge even the widest divides. "Yes," she said simply. 1,000 times yes. The wedding took place 2 months later, August 15th, 1871, exactly 6 months after the battle at Westfield Ranch. They held 2 ceremonies, 2 days apart. The Apache ceremony happened first, on the sacred mountain where Ayanna's people had gathered for generations. 80 Apache attended, along with Jack, Sam Chen, and 5 white friends willing to make the journey. Judge Harrison came, the territorial judge who'd seen truth when others saw only prejudice. Chief Naichi presided, his wounds finally healed, his voice strong. The ceremony followed ancient tradition. Blessing of the 4 directions: east for wisdom, south for growth, west for introspection, north for endurance. Jack and Ayanna shared the sacred pipe, smoke binding them together. They exchanged gifts. Jack gave a rifle for protection, a horse for mobility, a blanket for warmth. Ayanna gave a beaded vest she'd made herself, a knife forged by tribal craftsmen, and food prepared by her own hands. When Naichi bound their hands together with leather cord, he spoke in Apache first, then English. "What is joined here cannot be sundered by man. The spirits witness this union. The earth blesses it. Walk together until the mountains crumble." The feast afterward lasted until dawn. Venison and corn and berries, dancing to drums that had beaten for 1,000 years. Jack learned Apache songs that night. Words he didn't fully understand, but felt in his bones. The Christian ceremony the next day was smaller, more strained. Half of Copper Springs boycotted, but half attended, and that was enough. Father Miguel O'Brien, an Irish priest with progressive views and a good heart, performed the service. "Scripture commands us to love our neighbor," Father O'Brien said in his sermon. "It doesn't specify the color of that neighbor." Jack Westfield and Ayanna Redwing show us that love transcends the divisions we create. God's love knows no boundaries. Neither should ours. When Jack slipped the simple silver ring onto Ayanna's finger, turquoise set in the band because it meant healing and protection in her culture, his voice was steady. "I take you as my wife, to love and honor from this day until my last breath." Ayanna's vow, spoken in English she'd been practicing for weeks, brought tears to many eyes. "I take you as my husband. I promise to love you, to stand beside you, to teach our children both worlds, until the stars fall from the sky." They were married, against all odds, against all expectations, married. The years that followed were hard but good. Their first child was born in December 1872, a daughter. Jack insisted on naming her Emma Sarah, after his first wife and daughter. Ayanna agreed without hesitation. "Honor your past," she said, holding the newborn. "It made you who you are. Without Emma and Sarah, you wouldn't have become the man I love." Emma Sarah Westfield was baptized in both traditions. Father O'Brien blessed her in the church. Chief Nietzsche blessed her on the sacred mountain. She was the first child in Copper Springs to officially belong to both worlds. Their second child came in February 1874, a son, Thomas Nietzsche Westfield, named for Ayanna's uncle, the chief who'd survived massacre and led warriors to save them all. Jack's work as sheriff continued. Slow progress. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But progress nonetheless. He integrated the school despite protests. Apache children studied alongside white children. He hired the first Mexican deputy in the territory, then the first Apache. He prosecuted white criminals and Indian criminals with equal vigor, earning grudging respect even from those who hated his methods. The Apache reservation prospered. The gold mine, run as a tribal cooperative, brought steady income. $15,000 the first year, $20,000 the second, enough to build a school. A medical clinic where Apache herbal medicine and white doctors worked side by side. A trading post that became a model for fair commerce. But Jack made enemies. Powerful enemies who resented his interference in their schemes. In March 1875, 4 years after he'd taken the badge, someone tried to kill him. 3 men ambushed him outside the Silver Dollar Saloon. Night. Torches extinguished. Professional shooters hired from out of territory. The first shot hit Jack in the left shoulder. He went down, hand instinctively drawing his Colt. The second shot missed, plowing into the dirt beside his head. Then Kuruk appeared from nowhere. The Apache warrior had been visiting town, drinking coffee with Sam Chen and discussing law enforcement. He tackled Jack, covered him with his own body, and returned fire with deadly accuracy. Sam Chen burst from the sheriff's office with a shotgun. The twin barrels roared. One attacker went down, his chest a ruin. The fight lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, 2 attackers were dead, 1 captured and wounded. Jack survived with a bullet in his shoulder and renewed determination. The captured assassin confessed, named names. The conspiracy reached into 3 counties. 15 arrests followed. The message was clear. Jack Westfield couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be killed easily, and those who tried faced consequences. After he recovered, Ayanna found him alone in their bedroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The bandage on his shoulder, the scars on his back, the new lines around his eyes. "I'm getting old," he said. "You're 38. I feel 60. She moved behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, rested her head against his back. "Then maybe it's time to let someone younger carry the badge." "Sam?" "He's ready. You trained him well." Jack was quiet for a long moment. 5 more years. I'll serve until I'm 43. Then Sam takes over. We'll focus on the ranch, on our children." He turned to face her. "On growing old together." "Growing old sounds good." Their third child was born in April 1880. Another son, Henry Diego Westfield. Named for 2 men who'd shaped Jack's life. Henry Blackwood, who'd betrayed him but taught him about the complexity of choices. Diego Vasquez, who'd died proving what loyalty meant. When Sheriff Blackwood's sentence ended in 1880, he came to the Westfield Ranch, thinner, grayer, carrying his shame like visible weight. "I don't expect forgiveness," Henry said, standing at the door. "I just wanted you to know I'm leaving Arizona, taking my children to California, starting over where no one knows what I did." Jack studied his old friend. 5 years in territorial prison had broken something in Henry. But maybe it had also taught him something. "Your children," Jack said. "How are they?" "Surviving. Barely. My oldest son works in a mine. My daughter takes in washing. My youngest is sick. Needs a doctor we can't afford." Jack went inside, returned with a leather pouch. He pressed it into Henry's hand. $200. Get your son to a doctor. Get your family to California. Start clean. Henry stared at the money, then at Jack. "Why? After what I did?" "Because we all make choices we regret." "Because I have 3 children now, and understand what you were willing to do for yours. Because Diego would have wanted me to help." Jack paused. "And because someday I hope someone shows my children the same mercy." Henry Blackwood wept then, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I don't deserve this. None of us deserve the grace we're given. We just accept it and try to do better." They never saw Henry Blackwood again. But years later, Jack received a letter from California. Henry's children were thriving. His son had recovered. They'd built a good life. And every night, Henry told them about a sheriff in Arizona who'd shown him that redemption was possible. In 1880, at age 43, Jack Westfield retired from law enforcement. Sam Chen took the badge in a ceremony attended by 300 people, the biggest crowd Copper Springs had ever seen. Jack's retirement speech was characteristically brief. "9 years ago, I took this badge thinking one man could make a difference. I was wrong. One man can't change the world, but a community can. You all made the difference. Sam Chen will continue this work. Support him as you supported me. Remember that justice isn't a destination. It's a choice we make every single day." The applause was genuine. Even many who'd opposed Jack in the beginning had come to respect what he'd built. The years after retirement were Jack's happiest. He focused on the ranch, raised his children, taught them to ride and shoot and read and think. Emma Sarah grew into a fierce young woman who became a teacher, educating both white and Apache children. Thomas Nietzsche became a lawyer, defending Indian rights in territorial courts. Henry Diego inherited the ranch, running it with the same principles his father had established. Jack and Ayanna grew old together, slowly, year by year, watching their children grow, welcoming grandchildren, 12 in total, each one a bridge between worlds. They sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching sunsets paint the Arizona desert in copper and gold. Sometimes they talked. Often they didn't need to. The silence between them was comfortable, complete. In 1929, winter came hard. Ayanna, 84 years old, caught pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors and medicine men, she declined. Jack, 92, sat by her bed, holding her hand. "I see the sacred mountain," she whispered, her voice weak. "I see Takoda. I see Diego. They're welcoming me." "Not yet," Jack said, his voice breaking. "I'm not ready." "You're never ready, but it's time." She squeezed his hand with fading strength. "Tell Thomas our story. Make sure the grandchildren know what we built, what we proved."
I will. Promise me, no matter how hard, tell them everything. I promise. She smiled then, peaceful and content. I loved you, Jackson Westfield.
From the moment you risked everything to save me. Every day since. Every day forever. I love you, Ayanna, always. Her eyes closed. Her breathing slowed. And in the quiet of a winter evening, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Ayanna Westfield passed from this world to whatever waited beyond. Jack lived 6 more years without her. Long, lonely years. But he kept his promise. He told the story to his children, his grandchildren, anyone who'd listen. And on this day in 1935, sitting on his porch at 98 years old, he told it one more time to a 16-year-old boy who needed to understand. "That's the story, Thomas," Jack said, his voice hoarse from hours of talking. "That's how your grandmother and I built a life together. Not perfect, not easy, but ours." Thomas wiped tears from his face. "What happened to everyone else?" "Sam Chen served as sheriff until 1905, 30 years. He married, had 4 children, lived to be 78. Kuruk became a tribal elder, lived to 90. The conspiracy we exposed led to reforms across the territory. Not enough reforms, not fast enough, but progress." Jack paused. "The Westfield Ranch is still here, still in family hands. Your father runs it now. You'll run it someday. That's legacy, boy. Not fame, not fortune, just passing something good to the next generation." Thomas stood and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the land his grandfather had fought for, bled for, loved on for 64 years. "Grandpa, why did you tell me all this?" Jack rose slowly, joints creaking, and joined his grandson at the railing. "Because history repeats if we forget. Because in Europe right now, they're persecuting Jews. Here, they still persecute Indians, Mexicans, Negroes. Same hatred, different targets. Because you need to know that one person, one family, one community can make a difference. We proved it. Now you have to continue it." He placed his weathered hand on Thomas's shoulder. "You're not just a kid. You're the future. What you learn today, you'll teach your children tomorrow. That's legacy. My generation fought with guns. Your generation will fight with laws, votes, education. Harder fight, boy, but more important. Because wars end, but injustice continues as long as people hate what's different. But one person at a time, one choice at a time, we can change that. Your grandmother and I proved it. Now you have to prove it again." Thomas looked up at his grandfather, this man who'd lived almost a century, who'd seen so much, survived so much, loved so much. "I promise, Grandpa. I'll remember. I'll teach my children. Then I can rest soon." "Don't say that." Jack smiled, his eyes distant. "Boy, I'm 98 years old. I've lived enough, loved enough, fought enough. I'm tired. And I want to see your grandmother again, see Diego, see Emma and Sarah. I'm not afraid of death. I just needed to make sure the story didn't die with me." He took the army Colt from the table and handed it to Thomas. "Your grandmother's gun. Now it's yours. Not to kill with, to remember. Violence should be the last resort, never the first choice." Thomas accepted the revolver with reverence. "I'll treasure it." "Good. Now go call the family. I want to see everyone one more time." Thomas ran to do as asked. Jack stood alone on the porch, looking toward the family cemetery. 3 graves under the oak. 3 lives that had made his own worth living. "Soon," he whispered. "Soon I'll be with you again." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood and hope. And Jackson Westfield, 98 years old, survivor of wars and losses and a lifetime of hard choices, smiled. He'd kept his promise. The story would live on. The family gathered as the sun dropped toward the western horizon. They came from town, from neighboring ranches, from as far as Phoenix. 12 grandchildren, ranging in age from 30 down to 8. 3 children, now middle-aged themselves. Spouses. Great-grandchildren, too young to understand, but old enough to remember being there. They filled the porch and spilled into the yard. 43 people in total, 3 generations of Westfields, carrying the blood of a Union soldier and an Apache warrior in their veins. Jack sat in his rocking chair, a blanket across his lap, despite the August heat. He'd grown cold these last months, his ancient blood running thin. But his eyes were still sharp, taking in each face, memorizing them one final time. Emma Sarah came first, his eldest, 62 years old now, her hair more gray than black, her face lined but strong. She'd inherited Ayana's fierce spirit and Jack's stubborn sense of justice. 40 years as a school teacher, educating hundreds of children in both Apache and English. She'd married a Mexican rancher, Rafael Ortega, and raised 4 children who spoke 3 languages and belonged everywhere and nowhere. She knelt beside his chair and took his weathered hand. "Papa?" "My little warrior." He smiled at the childhood nickname. "Still fighting the good fight?" "Always. I learn from the best." "Your mother was the best. I just tried to keep up." Thomas Nietzsche approached next. 59 years old, a successful lawyer who'd argued 3 cases before the Territorial Supreme Court. He defended Apache land rights, Mexican water rights, Chinese immigration rights. Won more than he lost. Changed laws that needed changing. He stood straight and formal, shaking his father's hand with the grip of a man who'd learned strength from watching his father live it. "Sir." "Tom. Still tilting at windmills? You taught me that windmills sometimes fall if you hit them hard enough. I taught you that justice is worth fighting for, even when you know you'll lose." "That too." Henry Diego came last of the 3. 53 years old, weathered by sun and wind, his hands calloused from ranch work. He'd never left the Westfield ranch, never wanted to. He ran the operation now, 300 acres grown to 500, cattle numbers doubled, but the principles unchanged. Fair wages for all workers, regardless of color. Honest dealings with Apache neighbors. The land treated with respect, not just exploited for profit. He hugged his father, something the old man's generation rarely did, but the new generation embraced freely. "Dad, you need anything? Water? Food?" "Just this. All of you here. That's all I need." The grandchildren clustered closer. Jack knew each one by name, knew their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. He'd been present for their births, their first steps, their weddings. Some he'd known for 3 decades, others for less than 10 years. But all of them were his, part of the legacy he and Ayana had built. Young Thomas, 16, the one he'd told the story to, stood at his right hand. The boy's eyes were still red from crying, but his face showed determination. He'd been changed by what he'd heard today. "Good." "Gather round," Jack said, voice carrying surprising strength despite his 98 years. 43 people fell silent. "I don't have much time, but before I go, remember this." He looked at each face in turn. "I've killed men, 37 in war, 8 defending this ranch. I carry those numbers every day. But I also loved. Your grandmother and I proved love conquers hate. You are that proof." He paused for breath. "The world's getting dangerous. War is coming. When it does, remember, fight for what's right, not what's easy. Protect the weak. Judge people by actions, not blood. Build bridges, not walls. Love without limits." Emma Sarah squeezed his hand tighter. "Your grandmother was Apache. I was white. They said we'd fail. For 58 years, we proved them wrong. Every mixed bloodline in this family is a victory. Never forget that. Never be ashamed. Be proud." Tears flowed freely among the gathered family. "I'm proud of every one of you. Emma Sarah, you educated hundreds. Thomas, you changed unjust laws. Henry, you run this ranch with honor. And you young ones, you have the hardest job. Take what we built and make it bigger, better. The world will try to make you choose. Don't. Be both. Be all of it." A coughing fit seized him. When it passed, he smiled. "When I die, don't mourn long. I've lived full, longer than I deserved, happier than I expected. Be like that oak tree. Root deep. Reach high. Provide shade for those who come after. Now go on, live your lives. Make me proud. Make your grandmother proud. And when you think of us, don't think of the hard times. Think of the sunsets we watched together, the laughter we shared, the love we proved was possible." The family stayed for 2 more hours as darkness fell. They shared a meal together, filling every chair and bench and flat surface. Stories flowed like wine. Memories of Ayanna, fierce and funny and forever loved. Memories of Jack, stubborn and principled and surprisingly gentle. The children who'd known them both laughed and cried. The children who'd only heard stories asked questions and absorbed every word. As the stars emerged, one by one, families began to leave. Hugs and promises to visit soon. Grandchildren kissed Jack's weathered cheek. Great-grandchildren waved from sleepy arms. Finally, only Emma Sarah, Thomas Neitch, and Henry Diego remained. The 3 children of Jack and Ayanna, keeping vigil as their father's life wound down. "You should go," Jack said. "I'm fine, just tired." "We're staying," Emma Sarah said firmly. "You stayed with Mama at the end. We'll stay with you." Jack didn't argue. Truth was, he was glad for the company. They sat together on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars that had watched over Jack's birth in 1837. The same stars that had witnessed Antietam and Gettysburg. The same stars that had seen him save Ayanna and build a life with her. Stars that would keep watching long after he was dust. "Tell me about the first time you saw Mama," Emma Sarah said softly. Jack smiled, eyes distant with memory. She was bleeding in the dirt, half dead, still gripping that army colt like it was the only thing keeping her alive. And she looked at me with those fierce black eyes and said, "Help me live. Not save me, not please, just help me live." Like it was a command, like she knew I would. "Did you know then that you'd love her?" "No. Then I just knew she was trouble," he chuckled. "But the good kind of trouble, the kind worth having." "When did you know?"
The night before the battle.
We were sitting by the fire, and she told me about her people's beliefs, about carrying the souls of those you couldn't save. She understood my grief without me explaining it. That's when I knew. She saw all the broken parts of me and didn't turn away. Thomas Nietzsche spoke up. Were you afraid when you married her, knowing how people would react? Terrified, but more afraid of living without her. Fear is a poor reason not to love. They fell silent for a time. Jack's breathing grew shallow, labored. His children noticed, but said nothing. This was his journey to make. They were just witnesses. Around midnight, Jack stirred. "Tell me about your children," he said. "Tell me they're happy." So they did. Each of his children recounted the lives of their offspring, marriages and careers. Grandchildren he'd held as babies, who now had babies of their own. The spreading branches of the family tree he and Ayanna had planted. Jack listened, smiling, his eyes half closed. "Good," he whispered. "All good. Your mother would be proud." As the night deepened, his mind began to wander. He spoke to people who weren't there. "Diego, you old rascal, still complaining about Gettysburg?" His children exchanged glances, but didn't interrupt. "Emma, Sarah, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I tried to be. I tried." "Emma," Sarah took his hand. "Papa, they know. They've always known." "Henry Blackwood, I forgave you, brother. Hope you found peace." His breathing rattled, wet and rough. "Henry, Diego wanted to call the doctor, but Jack gripped his arm with surprising strength. No doctors. Just stay, please." So they stayed. At 2 a.m, Jack's eyes opened wide, focused, clear for a moment. "She's here," he whispered. "Ayanna. She's here. She says it's time." "We love you, Papa," Emma Sarah said through tears. "I know. I love you too. All of you. So much." His eyes moved to something they couldn't see, someone standing just beyond their vision. "I'm ready, fierce one. I've kept my promises, told the story, raised good children, lived well." He smiled, the expression transforming his ancient face. "Take me home." His last breath came gentle as a sigh. His hand relaxed in Emma Sarah's grip. And Jackson Westfield, 98 years old, veteran of Antietam and Gettysburg, former sheriff of Copper County, husband to 2 wives, and father to 3 children, and grandfather to 12, and great-grandfather to 8, passed from this world with a smile on his face. His children sat with him until dawn, holding his hands, telling him stories he could no longer hear, but perhaps somehow still knew. When the sun rose, painting the sky in copper and gold, they washed his body with careful reverence, dressed him in his best suit, the one he'd worn to marry Ayanna, pinned his sheriff's badge over his heart, though he'd retired from that role 35 years before. They buried him 3 days later on a Wednesday afternoon. Every person in Copper Springs attended. 300 people, maybe more. White and Apache and Mexican and Chinese. 3 generations of people whose lives he'd touched. The grave had been dug beside Ayanna's, under the spreading oak. The tree was massive now, its branches reaching 50 feet in every direction. Diego's grave on the other side. The 3 of them together again. Father O'Brien, 91 himself now, performed the service. Jack Westfield was a man who lived his principles. He fought for justice when it was unpopular. He loved to cross boundaries when it was forbidden. He built a legacy not of wealth, but of character. He showed us that one person standing firm can change the world around them. We will not see his like again. Chief Naichi's grandson, now the tribal leader, spoke next in Apache, then English. This man saved my great-aunt when no one else would. He fought beside my people when the world called us savages.
He married into our tribe and honored our ways. The Apache people will remember Jackson Westfield as long as stories are told.
Sam Chen, 82 years old, former sheriff, spoke last. Jack Westfield gave me a chance when no one else would. Made me a deputy when people said a Chinese man couldn't wear a badge. Taught me that the law should protect everyone equally. I spent 40 years in law enforcement trying to live up to his example. Never quite managed it, but I tried. That's what Jack taught us. To try, to keep trying, to never give up on justice. They lowered the coffin into the earth. Emma Sarah, Thomas Neich, and Henry Diego each threw a handful of dirt. Then the grandchildren. Then anyone who wanted to. The grave filled slowly, ceremonially. When it was done, they placed a simple headstone.
Jackson Westfield, 1837 to 1935.
Soldier, sheriff, father, friend. He chose justice over ease, love over hate, and built a bridge between worlds. Under the headstone, someone had carved a smaller inscription in Apache, Ayana's people's words for beloved and honored and remembered. The mourners dispersed slowly, but young Thomas stayed behind, standing alone under the oak tree, looking at the three graves. Henry Diego approached his son, put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You okay?" "Grandpa made me promise to tell the story, to pass it on." "Then you will." "What if I forget parts? What if I get it wrong?" "You won't. The important parts, the true parts, those you'll remember. And you know why?" Thomas looked up at his father. "Why?" "Because they're not just Grandpa's story. They're our story. Your story. Every Westfield carries this legacy. The blood of a Union soldier and an Apache warrior. The lessons of justice and love and standing firm, even when the world says you're wrong. That doesn't fade. That doesn't get forgotten. That gets lived." They stood together in the shade of the oak tree, fourth generation and third generation, looking at the graves of the first and second. Behind them, the Westfield Ranch stretched across 500 acres. Cattle grazed in the distance. Horses ran in the corrals. The rebuilt stable stood solid. The house showed the additions and improvements of 69 years. But the core remained. The cabin Jack had built with his own hands in 1866. Still standing. Still strong. Like the oak tree, rooted in good soil, reaching toward the light, providing shade for those who came after. A breeze stirred the leaves above them. For just a moment, Thomas could swear he heard voices on the wind. Jack's gravel-rough laugh, Ayana's fierce reply, Diego's Spanish curses that weren't really curses at all. "They're still here," he said softly. "Always," his father replied, "in the land, in the tree, in us. That's what legacy means. It never really leaves." They walked back to the house together as the sun began its descent toward evening. Behind them, 3 graves rested in the shade of the oak. 3 lives that had proven love could conquer hate, that justice was worth fighting for, that one person's choice to do right could ripple forward through generations. The story didn't end with Jack's death. Stories never really end. They just continue in different voices, new chapters, fresh pages. But this chapter, The story of Jackson Westfield and Ayanna Redwing and Diego Vasquez. This chapter was complete. And like all the best stories, it ended not with an ending, but with a beginning. The beginning of everything their descendants would build on the foundation they'd laid. The sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of copper and blood and gold and hope. The same colors it had painted the sky for 10,000 years. The same colors it would paint for 10,000 more. And under the oak tree, the earth settled softly over Jackson Westfield's grave, welcoming him home at last. 3 months after Jackson Westfield's funeral, young Thomas sat at the heavy oak desk in his grandfather's study. The room had been left untouched since Jack's death, preserved exactly as the old man had kept it. Books lined the walls, spines cracked from countless readings, maps of Arizona territory, some dating back to the 1860s, hung in frames. And on the desk, carefully arranged, lay Jack's personal effects. The silver sheriff's badge, polished to a mirror shine despite 35 years in a drawer. The Army Colt that had belonged to Ayanna, now passed to Thomas. A worn leather journal, its pages filled with Jack's careful handwriting, and a small daguerreotype in a tarnished frame showing a young man in Union blue and a blonde woman holding an infant. Emma and Sarah, the family that came before. Thomas opened the journal carefully. The first entry was dated May 10, 1866, just weeks after Jack had arrived in Arizona territory. Bought 300 acres today. Cost everything I have. The land is hard, unforgiving, beautiful in its cruelty. Like me, I suppose. Emma and Sarah are 6 months dead. I don't know why I survived when they didn't. But Diego says a man needs purpose, or he dies inside. So I'll build something here, something that lasts. Maybe that will be enough. Thomas turned pages, reading his grandfather's life in fragments. Entries about building the cabin, breaking horses, fighting drought. Brief, clipped sentences that spoke volumes in their restraint. Then, February 28, 1871, the handwriting changed, became urgent, intense. Found an Apache woman today, wounded, hunted, fierce as a wildcat. Every instinct says turn her away, let her be someone else's problem. But I can't. Something in her eyes reminds me of myself after Emma died. Surviving, but not living. I brought her home. Diego thinks I'm crazy. He's probably right. The entries that followed chronicled the battle, Diego's death, the arrival of Chief Naiche's warriors. Jack's sparse prose made the violence seem matter-of-fact, but Thomas could read between the lines, could see his grandfather's grief and rage and determination. And then, 6 months later, a single line that changed everything. I asked Ayanna to marry me today. She said yes. I don't know if I deserve a second chance at happiness, but I'm taking it anyway. Life is too short to spend it alone. Thomas smiled, imagining his grandfather kneeling in that sheriff's office, proposing to the woman who would become Thomas's grandmother. He continued reading, year by year, watching his family's history unfold in ink and paper. The birth of Emma Sarah in 1872. Jack's joy was palpable, even through the restrained prose. Held my daughter today. Named her for the family I lost. Ayanna insisted, said I should honor my past. This child is a miracle, a second chance I never expected. She has her mother's eyes, and, I suspect, her mother's fire. Thomas Naiche's birth in 1874. Another child, a son, named for the chief who saved us all. He's strong, healthy, loud. Diego would have loved him. Wish my old friend could have met my children. Wish he could see what we built. Henry Diego's arrival in 1880. Third child. Final child, the doctor says. Ayana is 43, too old for more safely. Named him for two men who shaped my life. Henry Blackwood, who taught me about the complexity of choices. Diego Vasquez, who taught me about loyalty unto death. This boy will carry their lessons forward. The journal chronicled the years of Jack's sheriffing. Cases solved and cases lost. Victories and setbacks. The slow, grinding work of changing a community one day at a time. An entry from March 1875, after the assassination attempt, was longer than most. Kuruk saved my life today. Took a bullet meant for me. He'll survive, the doctor says, but it was close. I've been thinking about debt and friendship and what we owe each other. Kuruk says the Apache have no word for debt between brothers. What you do for family, you do freely. No repayment expected. No balance to settle. I like that philosophy. Better than keeping score of who saved whom. Diego saved me at Gettysburg. I saved Ayana at the creek. Kuruk saved me tonight. We're even because we're family. That's enough. Thomas found himself nodding, understanding flowing through him. This was what his grandfather had been trying to teach him that last day. That legacy wasn't about buildings or money. It was about the connections forged, the principles lived, the love shared freely. He turned to the final entries, written in shakier handwriting as Jack's age caught up with him. January 15th, 1929. The day Ayana died. She's gone. 58 years together, and it wasn't enough. Will never be enough. But I'm grateful for every day, every hour, every moment. She taught me how to live again, after I thought living was finished. She gave me 3 children and 12 grandchildren, and a life worth having. The house is empty without her, but it's full of her memory. I see her everywhere, in the way the morning light hits the kitchen, in the oak tree we planted together, in our children's faces. She's not gone, not really, just waiting for me to catch up. The entries after that grew shorter, more philosophical. Jack reflecting on his life, his choices, his regrets. Not many regrets, Thomas noted. His grandfather had lived deliberately, made peace with his decisions. The final entry was dated September 28, 1935, just a week before Jack's death. I'm 98 years old today. Lived longer than I ever expected or deserved. Emma would be 97 if she'd lived. Sarah would be 75. Ayana gone 6 years now. Diego 64 years. All my ghosts are old ghosts, but they're good company. Young Thomas asked me today if I was afraid of dying. I told him no. I'm tired, ready, eager to see Ayana again, to see all of them. Emma and Sarah and Diego and Henry Blackwood and Kuruk and Chief Neitch. So many gone ahead, waiting. But I can't go yet. Not until I've told the story one more time, made sure it sticks, made sure Thomas understands what we built and why. The bridge between worlds that Ayana and I constructed. Not a bridge of wood or stone, a bridge of blood and love and stubborn determination to prove the haters wrong. We succeeded. Our children are that proof. Our grandchildren are that proof. Every mixed marriage in Copper Springs, every integrated school, every fair trial, every equal law. All of it traces back to one moment. To me, finding a wounded Apache woman and choosing to help instead of turn away. One choice, that's all it took to change everything. I hope Thomas understands that. I hope when he faces his own moment of choice, he remembers. Remembers that doing right is always harder than doing easy, but it's the only thing worth doing. Tomorrow I'll tell him everything. Then I can rest. Thomas closed the journal gently, tears streaming down his face. His grandfather had known, had felt death approaching, and made his final act a gift. The story, the legacy, the lesson. A knock on the study door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." His father, Henry Diego, entered carrying a wooden box Thomas had never seen before. "Your grandfather wanted you to have this. He wrote instructions."
"Mays to give it to you after you'd read his journal." Thomas took the box. It was made of oak, probably from the tree that shaded the family graves. Simple construction, but beautifully made. On the lid, burned into the wood with a hot iron, were 3 names: Emma, Diego, Ayana. He opened it carefully. Inside lay letters, dozens of them, carefully preserved, organized by date. The first envelope was addressed in Emma's delicate script, the second in what must be Diego's rougher hand, the rest in Ayana's distinctive writing, English words shaped by an Apache tongue. Henry Diego pointed to a note lying on top of the letters. "Read that first. It's from your grandfather." Thomas unfolded the paper. Jack's handwriting, firm despite his age when he'd written it. "Thomas, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and you've read my journal." "Good. Now read these letters. They're from the 3 people who made me who I was. Emma taught me how to love. Diego taught me how to be loyal. Ayana taught me how to live. Their words will teach you things I couldn't say out loud. Read them, learn from them, then pass them to your children when the time comes. This is how we keep the dead alive. Through memory, through story, through the lessons they left behind. Be worthy of them, boy. Be worthy of the name you carry. Your loving grandfather, Jackson Westfield." Thomas looked up at his father. "Did you read these?" "Years ago, when I was about your age. Grandpa showed them to me, said I needed to understand where I came from before I could know where I was going." "What's in them?" "Emma's letters are love letters she wrote to Grandpa during the war. He carried them through every battle. They kept him human when the war tried to make him a monster. Diego's letters are from his family in Mexico, translated. They talk about honor and sacrifice and what it means to be a good man. And Grandma Ayana's letters." Henry Diego paused, emotion thick in his voice. "Those are special. She wrote to Grandpa every day during the first year they were married. Before she learned to read and write well, she had a missionary help her. The letters talk about building a life together, about facing hatred with love, about proving that 2 people from different worlds can make something beautiful." He put his hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Read them slow. Take your time. Let them sink in. These aren't just letters. They're your inheritance. More valuable than land or money. They're wisdom from people who lived through hard times and came out stronger." Henry Diego left, closing the door softly behind him. Thomas selected the first letter. The envelope was yellowed with age, the ink faded but still readable. Emma's handwriting was beautiful, flowing, educated.
My dearest Jack, you left 3 days ago, and already the house feels empty. Sarah asks for you every evening before bed. I tell her Papa is fighting to keep us safe. She's too young to understand, but she nods as if she does. I pray every night for your safety, for your swift return, for this terrible war to end. The reports in the newspapers are frightening. So many dead, so much suffering. Please, my love, be careful. Don't try to be a hero. Just survive. Come home to us. That's all the heroism I need. All my love, Emma. The letter was dated June 1862. Jack would have been 25 years old, newly married, fighting in a war that would define his generation. Thomas read every letter in the box, Emma's words chronicling her hope and fear, her fierce love for a man fighting in a brutal war, her joy when he came home on leave, her terror when he left again. The final letter from Emma was different, not addressed to Jack, but to whoever might find it, written in shaky handwriting on the day she died. To whoever reads this, I am Emma Westfield. Today is May 3rd, 1865. The war is over, but I will not live to see my husband return. Raiders came at dawn. They're burning the house. I can't escape with Sarah. The smoke is too thick. If Jack survives, if he finds this, tell him it's not his fault. Tell him I loved him with everything I had. Tell him to live, not just survive. To find happiness again if he can. To be the good man I know he is. Tell him Sarah and I will wait for him, however long it takes. All my love, always, Emma. The letter had been recovered from the ruins of the burned house, somehow survived the fire. Jack had carried it with him for 70 years. Thomas wept, understanding now the depth of his grandfather's grief, the guilt he'd carried, the miracle of finding love again with Ayana. Diego's letters were fewer, written in Spanish, translated by someone's careful hand into English. They spoke of family honor, of protecting those weaker than yourself, of loyalty as the highest virtue. One letter from Diego's mother, written just before she died, struck Thomas particularly hard. My son, you are far from home, but you carry our family's honor with you. Remember always that true strength is not in how hard you can hit, but in what you're willing to endure for others. A man who stands alone is just stubborn. A man who stands for others is noble. Be noble, my Diego, and know that even in death, I am proud of you. Diego had died at 42, carrying his family's honor to the end. Dying to save horses because he knew Jack needed them to survive. Finally, Thomas read Ayana's letters. There were hundreds, spanning decades. The early ones were simple, her English basic, helped by missionary translation. My husband Jack, today I learned new word, beautiful. The missionary says it means something that makes the heart glad to see. You are beautiful to me. Not your face, though I like your face. Your spirit, your honor, your strength that protects without crushing. You are beautiful, and I am grateful the spirits brought you to save me. Your wife, Ayana. As the years passed, her English improved. The letters grew more complex, more philosophical. One from 1880, when Jack retired from sheriffing, captured her wisdom perfectly. My beloved Jack, you told me today you worry you didn't change enough, didn't do enough, didn't fix all the problems. This is foolish talk. One man cannot fix the world, but one man can light a candle in darkness, and other candles can light from his flame, and soon there is light where before was only dark. You lit the candle, my love. Sam Chen carries it now. Others will carry it after him. The light spreads. That is enough. That is everything. We change the world, one candle at a time. You taught me this. Now I teach you to believe it. Your fierce one, Ayanna. The final letter was dated December 1928, a month before Ayanna died. My husband of 57 years, I feel death approaching. The cold in my bones won't leave. The doctor talks of pneumonia, but I know truth. My time is ending. I am not afraid. I have lived full life, loved good man, raised strong children, seen grandchildren thrive. What more can a woman ask? But I worry for you. You have lived for me these last years. When I am gone, you must live for them, for our children, our grandchildren, for the story we made together. Promise me you will tell it. Make them understand what we proved, that love conquers hate, that justice is possible, that bridges can be built if people are willing to try. Tell them, Jack. Tell them until they understand. Then you can rest. Then you can join me. I will wait for you in the sacred mountain, however long it takes. Forever yours, Ayanna. Thomas closed the last letter carefully, reverently. He sat in the quiet study, surrounded by his grandfather's books and maps and memories, and felt the weight of legacy settle onto his shoulders. Not a burden, a responsibility, a privilege. He understood now what his grandfather had been trying to teach him. Legacy wasn't about being perfect, it was about trying, about making hard choices and living with the consequences, about building something good and hoping it lasted beyond your own life. Jack and Ayanna had built a bridge, not of wood or stone, but of love and determination and stubborn refusal to accept the world's divisions as permanent. That bridge had held for 64 years, had supported 3 generations, would support more if Thomas and his cousins and siblings maintained it. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the Westfield ranch, the same sun that had set over this land when it was Apache territory, the same sun that had set when Jack first arrived, broken and grieving, the same sun that had set on countless battles and births and deaths and weddings. The oak tree stood silhouetted against the orange sky, its massive branches reaching toward heaven. 3 graves rested in its shade. 3 people who had proven that different worlds could merge, could create something new and beautiful and enduring. Thomas made a decision. He would attend college as his father wanted, would study law like his uncle Thomas Nietzsche. But he wouldn't leave the ranch forever. He would return, would practice law here in Copper Springs, would continue the work his grandfather had started. The bridge needed maintaining, needed defending, needed extending to reach new shores. That would be Thomas's work, his generation's work. He turned from the window and carefully placed all the letters back in the oak box. He would read them again, many times, would memorize them, would pass them to his own children someday when they were old enough to understand. This was how the dead stayed alive, through memory, through story, through lessons passed down in careful handwriting on yellowed paper. Jack Westfield was gone, but his legacy remained, in the land, in the tree, in the laws he'd helped change, in the community he'd helped build, in the family he and Ayanna had created. The bridge endured, and Thomas would make sure it kept enduring, season after season, generation after generation, until a world existed where bridges were no longer needed, because all people saw themselves in each other. That was the dream. That was the goal. That was the legacy. Outside, the sun touched the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over Jack's birth and death. The same stars that would watch over Thomas's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Eternal and unchanging, bearing witness to all the small, beautiful, painful, glorious moments of human struggle and triumph. The story didn't end here. Stories never really end. They just continue in new voices, carrying forward the truth that one person's choice to love instead of hate, to build instead of destroy, to bridge instead of divide, can echo through time in ways that change everything. Jack Westfield had made that choice, had lived it for 98 years, had taught it to everyone who knew him. Now Thomas would carry it forward. The bridge endured, and always would. The end.